This next comment comes from Rooflight. And it's in response to playing the Behringer RD8 with your keyboard, a video I did in September 2020. And Rooflight writes, awesome, thank you for this. I've got several options with the RD8. I can sync via MIDI with my DAW as master and the RD8 as slave. I can also connect my TR-707 via sync to the RD8 and now via keyboard with the RD8 effectively as a sound module to my DAW. The thing I'd like to know is how can I use the swing shuffle function and record that into my DAW using the RD8 as a slave to the DAW, or should I just use the method of recording patterns via MIDI, add audio and quantize the MIDI info, then just record the audio from the RD8 into the DAW? I make house music, so swing is pretty important. In an ideal world, I'd love to just record the swing patterns from the RD8 into the DAW and with the DAW as the master clock, but I can't seem to get access to the shuffle when the RD8 is in slave mode to the DAW via MIDI. Channel 10 was purely for general MIDI drums. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Do you know what? That's quite a good comment, isn't it? Fab comment and question. That's all I can say. Anyway, the first thing is look at your clock source. I would personally say that if you're recording into your DAW, the DAW should be the clock source, and that your other instruments should all take time from the DAW. This allows you to vary the time codes in the DAW, and all the other instruments react. And this is quite important. Having said that, there are reasons why you might want the clock to be the drum machine or another source. Back in the good old days, you quite often had a studio time source and everything was synced to the studio time source. So, you know, it was a completely different way of doing it. MIDI kind of overtook that, but in a lot of professional recording studios, they still kept the studio time source because it was considered more accurate than MIDI for a long time. And in fact, probably with a number of manufacturers and how they implement MIDI, probably still is more accurate, but we can kind of get away with it with the way that we work with computers nowadays. Now to swing. This is really interesting, and I stand to be corrected by somebody as I can't test it at the moment. I have tested this, so but my understanding is the RD8 transmits the notes that correspond to the parts of the kit that are actually being played in normal time. It does not transmit swing. Swing is an effect that the RD8 adds to the notes being played in real time, but it doesn't add. It doesn't transmit the slightly adjusted time signatures that swing would give the notes in the MIDI stream. I seem to recall there was an issue in an earlier firmware where if you were using swing and changed the MIDI timing, but this has been addressed, so I can't reproduce. I haven't been able to reproduce this. I am at least one version of firmware out of date on my RD8, by the way, at the moment. Of course, you can record the audio from the RD8, and this is probably the way you would do it. And the audio will include the swing settings. But I did fire this open to the community and got not a lot of response, I have to be honest. Anyway, Rooflight responded. I had to think about that. Hi John, firstly I should have said I'm using an out-of-date version of Logic 8, however it still syncs to the RD8 OK via MMC or MIDI, and although timing isn't rock solid, it's almost there and can be adjusted, and I can adjust the audio once recorded just by shifting the track to the left or the right, which is kind of what I was alluding to. The major plus is that while synced to Logic, the RD doesn't drift over time, which means the whole track is in time. Not bad for an ancient version of Logic running through an old MIDI man for USB interface. There is nothing wrong with a MIDI man interface. I use it all the time. Although I did have to update my MIDI man interface because this computer behind me runs a later version of Mac OS, and of course the MIDI man I had didn't have drivers on the latest version of Mac OS. What a real pain. I completely forgot the audio record live option from the RD8. The only problem is that it wouldn't be synced to anything else, which is going to cause issues. The other issue I have is that only 2 audio inputs, as I'm using an Apology Duet, the old version, which means that I have to track the 11 individual outs 2 at a time from the RD8 if I want to process each individual track to form a group of tracks for a bus. Yeah, that is going to be a pain, I have to be honest. I know my kit is well out of date, but it works, and I've never had reason to upgrade, although I don't have the funds to do so at the moment. You and me, mate, joined the club. It looks like the quantize option might be the way forward, as I can get it to record MIDI output from the RD8 back into Logic, quantize the MIDI notes with Logic swing patterns, and then record the audio either via individual outs or the main out while still syncing to Logic. Keeping everything in time, I can then layer in my 707. I've got a 606 as well, although that's a little trickier to sync as it's a clock DIN only. So to slave that from the TR707. Convoluted? Yes. Impossible? No. It does make life a lot harder. I know newer versions of Logic and audio inputs can handle multiple audio inputs, and I'm limited to 2 channels, but that's how it is for now. So in the case of me finding workarounds, it does the job. I also realise the RD8 has a USB output. I've never tried this. Does it output audio over multiple channels over USB? Perhaps I should read the read the user manual. I appreciate your reply. Thanks, John. It's given me a bit to consider. I need to check the USB connection, though, as that might be another way forward rather than just relying on audio and having to faff around to align everything track by track, although I'm equally happy doing it through this process. Who knew that getting that authentic house swing would be such a challenge and a complete bugger? These things are sent to try us, and one of the things that's really interesting, I was having this conversation fairly recently, is you kind of sort of sit there and think, how many inputs do I need? And you always need more. So for years I've used the Focusrite, which gives me 10 inputs, I think. Yeah, 10 inputs. And for most stuff that I do when I'm recording instruments into the computer and into the DAW, 10 inputs is ample number of inputs. But there is occasion. And one of those occasions quite often is trying to run multiple drum machines. In terms of trying to record the audio out of the drum machine, and then realizing that I've got 15 instruments being run and only 10 inputs. So that kind of is a really interesting experience, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. There are 2 rules with studio setup in my book, and the first one: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the second rule is referred to Rule 1. Recording instruments can always be a challenge. So removing many points of failure reduces the issues. And that's very, very true. I mean, many a day I've been tracking an issue through only to find out it's something silly like I'd unplugged a cable or unplugged a patch cable. As you state, you do have the audio over USB. The Behringer RD8 will present a channel for each instrument into your machine. Over USB, so you can record each instrument on a separate track. This may well aid the kind of the Apology 2 input setup that you have, allowing them to be used for other instruments to record at the same time. And to be honest, most creators do not need facilities offered by the latest DAWs. I very rarely use a lot of facilities that are available in my DAW, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I go back to using the old sequencers. I mean, you know, I started off, my first sequencer was, I kind of jumped the Atari and the Amiga, and my first sequencer was Cubase running on a PC, and God was it painful, but that was my first experience. And all that did was a sequencer. It didn't do anything else. Now since then I've obviously got a number of different machines that I've got in storage and in the collection, and one of the things is the Yamaha CX5M. It is rough and ready, and it offers only 8 tracks of sequencing capability. But you know what? It's really simple to use. You can actually rough a track up very, very quickly in it, and then if you wanted to, you can send the note data via MIDI to a more complex DAW if that's what you want to do. Anyway, that's a really interesting question. I still go back to my 2 rules. Number 1, and this is for any piece of musical equipment: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Number 2, refer to rule 1.